Hi there, this is Claire Norell. I'm a yoga teacher and I facilitate trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga, an evidence-based adjunct treatment for complex trauma. This is Complex Trauma and Body-Centered Healing Part 5, talking about trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga, otherwise known as TCTSY, and some other healing resources. If you've come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. That's from Leela Watson, an Australian Indigenous activist who also attributes that saying to her fellow activists. And a reminder that sometimes learning about trauma can feel overwhelming. Please feel welcome to take care of yourself as needed. You might take a moment to feel the ground beneath you, the support beneath your feet. Find a comfortable position to be in as you go through this presentation. Maybe take a breath or two and feel your breath. Maybe take a stretch if you want to do that. And as you feel ready, you can go on. So TCTSY was developed at the Trauma Center of the Justice Resource Institute in Brooklyn, Massachusetts by David Emerson, who is the author of Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga, along with psychologist Jen Turner, other clinicians, trauma researchers, and people living with complex trauma. It's recognized by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration as an empirically validated adjunct treatment for complex trauma and complex PTSD. It can be especially helpful for people who want to try yoga without being touched, watched, or corrected, or who don't feel comfortable in regular yoga classes. It can be good for people who want to use yoga to practice being in charge of their own bodies while in safe connection with another person. Or people who want to explore movement and their own experience at their own pace, or who want to practice body-based mindfulness or interoception. People who want to work with someone who has in-depth training and a solid understanding of trauma, and people who want to be treated with respect for their own perceptions and abilities as they work with healing from trauma. It's used with adults, youth, and children. One key way that TCTSY can be different from some yoga classes is in the relationships between people. So in TCTSY, the teacher, usually called a facilitator, is present to offer possibilities for movement and space for people to explore movement and mindfulness in their own way at their own pace. So I've got this little graphic here. What are other words for autonomy? Freedom, liberty, sovereignty, self-government, independence, self-rule, self-determination, self-sufficiency, home rule. So I have that there really because TCTSY is designed to support people in feeling into and developing their sense of self-determination and sovereignty within a respectful relationship. There's great diversity in yoga practices in general, even among traditional lineages in India. For the purposes of healing complex trauma, TCTSY creates a different kind of relationship among practitioners with no gurus and no master teachers, because we're going for relationships more of equality and respect, in that sense of respect. Yet, TCTSY owes a great deal to the long history of yoga and the people who've practiced and refined it for millennia. Their collective wisdom lives in TCTSY, both in the practice of asanas or physical forms, and in the ways that TCTSY reflects the principles of beneficial living that are central to most yoga traditions, the yamas and niyamas. So these are not dogma, and they may not be mentioned at all in a TCTSY practice. They often won't be, but they influence it through the history of yoga, and at times you may feel them in practicing TCTSY. So the yamas include ahimsa, do no harm. So these words are in Sanskrit, the ancient language used in yoga. Satya, be truthful. Asteya, be trustworthy. Brahmacharya, sometimes translated as conserve energy. Aparigraha, live simply, let go. And then the niyamas include shaucha, live cleanly. Santosha, accept the moment. Tapas, practice to create change. Svadhyaha, see beyond thoughts. Ishvara pranidhana, practice gratitude for all that is larger than yourself. How is TCTSY different from other kinds of yoga classes or from trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive yoga classes? General yoga classes could include, could be a hatha or a flow class, a yin, ashtanga, iyengar, hot yoga. There's quite a variety of yoga classes out there. And generally, they may help relieve symptoms of trauma and increase feelings of peace and well-being. But some classes and some teachers as well, some particular practices, may feel unsafe or triggering for some people with trauma. Teachers in most yoga classes are often trained to tell students what to do as succinctly as possible. Teachers may touch or physically correct students' body positions, and they may not understand the physiological basis of trauma or how to work with it, and they may give directions to breathe in particular ways. Trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive yoga classes other than TCTSY, this could be various styles of yoga that might be trauma-informed. So it could be a hatha class or flow or yin or ashtanga, but with a teacher who's trained to help create safety and respect and some degree of healing after trauma. Teachers in this case may focus on helping people learn to feel safe and calm. They may encourage curiosity and they may avoid judging people. They may still tell people what to do with a directive teaching style, and they may emphasize breathing to calm the nervous system. I think this is often the case. Their physical contact from the teacher may be optional or may not happen. Some yoga positions may be avoided that are known to be commonly triggering for people who have trauma. And the teachers know about trauma if they're teaching a trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive class, but their training may vary. It could be anywhere from 2 to 20 hours. Sometimes I think around 40, but often less. TCTSY is an evidence-based adjunct treatment for complex trauma, as I keep saying. And the emphasis is on strengthening a person's own sense of themselves, their agency, their self-sufficiency, while in connection or in relationship to other human beings. It's based on trauma theory, neuroscience, attachment theory, and hatha yoga, with a lot of attention to emotional safety and emotional regulation, calming the nervous system. It targets, strengthens, and reconnects specific areas of the nervous system that are hurt by trauma. And it's been found to alleviate or heal many specific symptoms of complex trauma. And TCTSY facilitators have over 300 hours of training in complex trauma healing, and we have ongoing supervision from the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. So here's a little more about facilitators. Again, that first part, we're certified. We're trained to be respectful, supportive, and very attentively, carefully non-coercive. We work with primary symptoms of complex trauma, maintain confidentiality and healthy boundaries, use less triggering language in yoga forms, individualize one-on-one sessions as needed, help people own and take charge of their own practice. And we receive, as I said, ongoing supervision, peer support, and training through the Center for Trauma and Embodiment. Emotional safety in TCTSY. Everything is an invitation. So anything that you're invited to do, there's no pressure to do it. You can choose to or not. No pressure to do anything that you don't feel like doing. You always have choices. It may be simple A-B choices, move this way. You might move this way or possibly this other way. You could choose between those choices or you could do something totally different. There is not one external right way to do the yoga forms in TCTSY. What matters is how it feels for you and what you choose. There are no corrections, assists, or physical contact, and as much personal space as possible. The language you use is really developed to encourage a sense of choice and safe connection within your own body. And we omit certain yoga forms, breathing, or language that tend to be triggering for people with trauma. And the TCTSY facilitator stays at the front of the room, also participating, and this is intentional. It's a way to invite a sense of synchrony and attunement, a certain kind of connection, and the possibility of a safe attachment relationship within clear boundaries. So moving in synchrony with another person, where they're in charge of their body, you're in charge of your body, can have real therapeutic benefits for people with complex trauma. And then we work with confidentiality and respect for the decisions of each person. And participants are encouraged to also work with a primary therapist as needed if they want to verbally process a little more what they experience in their healing and in their work with TCTSY. Physical safety. We offer simple suggestions for ways to move safely into and out of yoga forms or stretches. The facilitator offers yoga forms that have a relatively low risk of physical injury and different versions to fit different needs, so it's a fairly gentle practice. If it seems that somebody may be at risk of physical harm, the facilitator may repeat safety cues, like saying, well, if you like, you might move your knee, in such a way, or I'm not saying that very clearly, but there's different ways we might repeat a cue if we think that somebody is at risk of any kind of physical harm. And if they don't come back to a place where it looks like they might be safe, we might invite the whole group to come out of that practice without calling attention to any one person. So basically no individual is ever called attention to in that particular way, because for a lot of people with complex trauma, in the group situation in particular, that can be very triggering. So complex trauma is what happens when a person is trying to survive under conditions of chronic disempowerment. So the approach to treatment is mostly about empowerment and not about calming down. So it's healing through body-centered empowerment within a supportive relationship. We are not separate. We are of this world and of each other. And the power within us is a great, if not invincible, power. Though we can be hurt, we can heal. Though each one of us can be destroyed, within us is the power of renewal. And there's still time to choose that power. So that's the writer Starhawk who wrote that. A very brief recap of complex trauma, body-centered healing. Traumatic occurrences are directly experienced or witnessed because of intensity or repetition. Your neurons form new pathways within a person's brain and nervous system. And, that's the neuroplasticity. These new pathways create implicit memory to help quickly and unconsciously predict and respond to potential harm, preparing the various systems of the body to take protective action and or shut down to avoid detection or diminish suffering. Over time, these triggered unconscious responses, which were originally activated to protect you, can turn into chronic stress, affecting many body systems and negatively impacting physical and emotional health, memory, and well-being. Healthier responses to stress can be practiced and learned, mitigating and in some cases reversing the negative effects of trauma and the effects of adverse childhood experiences. So again, this presentation is based on the work of these people. You can stop the presentation here if you want to look at this list. Here's another list, a good list that I got from Jean McKelney, of some questions you might ask a treatment professional if you're thinking about working with them on healing, particularly from complex trauma. So I won't read these, but you might stop the presentation to look at this list if that interests you. If you work supporting people who have trauma, these are questions you might ask yourself to help yourself do the best work you can and take care of yourself at the same time in supporting people on their healing, in their healing from trauma. Another resource list, a little bit longer. You can stop the presentation and look at that if you want to. And finally, thank you once again for your interest in this presentation. You're welcome to share it with other people if you want to help make it accessible, but please acknowledge where it came from and the people involved in doing this research. Thanks again so much for your interest.